Hello, my name is Alex Malachowski. You'll have to excuse me, I'm so sorry. My throat is just absolutely ripping me apart today. I have a few lozenges in as I'm gonna attempt to try this. So stay with me. So, here today I present the marvelous adventures of Walter Lippmann, presented by myself, Alex Malachowski. As you can see here, you can see him pictured in the two photos to the left and to the right. A very exquisite young man. So, a little bit about Walter Lippmann. In his time, he was an influential American journalist. He was a writer as well, and as a highly acclaimed political commentator with a career that stretched almost 60 years. He became one of the most well respected writers in the world, leaving behind a paper trail of many works for today's journalists and those before us to kind of get a sense of learning for what he was going to be doing. Walter Lippmann was a man of respect and honor. He had the utmost respect for all of his colleagues as well as writers um, in his journey. He had produced many works that were accompanied with even an award winning column. He had been a journalist, a writer, and many more. He also published a few works along his journey as well. So, as you can see, there are nothing but phenomenal things to say about him. Um, he had definitely struggled with his idea of belief in democracy. It seemed to be that he could not think that the general public could meet up to the demands of these educated electorals, from successful democracies. And he was one of the early, experts, as they would say, to kind of go out and carry on the function of a government official. And in doing so, he had also stumbled upon a few, you know, questions of their effectiveness and to go through the process, as one would say. Okay, moving on. Do apologize, Miss Smith, for my voice. This is terrible, terrible. I'm so sorry. And a little bit about his early life. Walter Lippmann was born in September 23rd of 1889 in New York City, New York. He was a single child, as research shown, or an only child, not a single child, excuse me. His parents, who had been Jacob and Daisy Baum Lippmann, were of German and Jewish descent. As I stated before, that he was an only child. Family time was a focus. He was given an area where he could write and explore. He had few limitations on what could be seen for his future. He had a open, vast majority of a difference, as many other children may have not had in that time period. Walter was able to move forward with his dreams and his work. As stated, family time was their focus. He said the family had been a part of upper class in New York City, and actually stated a rule of their home was that they would take annual trips to Europe. So one would say that he was almost very privileged in his time. The family had given him a safety net in his home. He was free from stress and anxiety and abuse. He was able to express himself freely. He was able to, move on the world, explore, have a phenomenal time, one would say, an almost perfect childhood. Moving on. As for his schooling, he had been a very extremely smart scholar. Soon after he turned 17, he had entered Harvard University, and he studied under three magnificent philosophers: George Santayana, William James, and Graham Wallas. He focused his studies mainly on philosophy. He was one to let his mind wander and travel and be one to dig deeper into solutions that, or problems and solutions that had been entering the world of, journalism, around politics, around philosophy. He loved to submerge himself in different ideologies. Thus, not just falling short, not just philosophy, but he also had an extreme talent for excelling in languages. He also spoke German and French, which had also made him a standout. In just 3 short years at Harvard University, he made quite the impact as he founded the Harvard Socialist Club. However, his socialist stance was not very long lasting. That had kind of taken a turn. And following his graduation from Harvard University, Lippmann had started his influential pathway to becoming a memorable journalist, one that would seem to be taking the world by storm. And then, okay, here we are on to the next. Lippmann kickstarted his career, after accepting a secretary position from a muckraking journalist named Lincoln Stephens. He had soon taken on his role to become a journalist, a media critic, as well as a political philosopher. He had taken his first steps. Towards success, and the rest is history. Apologize. And one of his most memorable arguments had been challenging the intention of true democracy, as it could not serve a complex society. So obviously, Lippmann had a very strong desire and very much of a problem with democracy and how it saw itself moving towards a complex society in the industrial world. He struggled to see where the goal could come. In the year 1912, Lippmann was able to publish a preface to politics with the help of 2 colleagues, Herbert Croly and Walter Whale. The trio had become the founding editors of the New Republic magazine almost a year later. Not just alone, he had been able to take this head on with some of his colleagues that had worked together and, had strived for the same goal. Lippmann had exceeded his goals in the workforce. He had, taken the world by storm. He had been setting himself new goals. He had taken his goals and surpassed them. He had been everything he'd ever wanted to be. And during the Battle of World War I, he became advisor to President Woodrow Wilson, and he actually helped aid him in crafting 14 points, which he then later served as a delegate for the Paris Peace Conference. His work led to the observation of public opinion, which had held policymakers accountable to citizens, as well as the same theory has been attempted to be recreated as societies enter a new era in, as the industrial era is much farther than it was today. Many are trying to reimagine what his goal was. As far as his legacy, he had passed away peacefully on December 14th, 1974 in New York. The legacy he left behind is influential to any journalist today. With an arraignment of awards, Lippmann had received the Presidential Medal of Honor from Lyndon B. Johnson, as well as a Pulitzer Prize for his column Today and Tomorrow. He had also published 3 books and made their way to success. Lippmann enabled a sense of media criticism for journalists today, as he critiqued performances of newspaper reporting out their flaws and their inaccuracies. He left a mark at Harvard University, as Walter Lippmann House is the home to the Nieman Foundation for Journalism. Even years after his graduation, he was still making an impact. So needless to say that Walter Lippmann made his mark on journalism and journalists to follow. And that is my presentation on Walter Lippmann.